So how do you go from fashion designer to filmmaker? And
Yeah.
I'm assuming, I mean, fashion designer, you've got a lot of visual, obviously, cues and whatnot.
Right, and
creatively.
fashion design, there was a lot between fashion designer. I was in my 20s when I was a fashion designer and did it in the 80s in New York City and had a great time. And we did really well. We sold across the country to great stores. But I did have children in between then, and I always have studied art. I've studied fine art. You know, I went to National Academy in New York and at Marymount College in New York, and I had studied with private teachers my whole childhood. So I always had a creative and visual longing to always be creating, you know, and even if I'm cooking, to me, I want to make it creative. So I felt like I had that. I'm very comfortable creating things and looking at, you know, with photography and art, you're sort of dealing with a certain rectangle, and so composition and all that stuff, and light and dark, and visuals are second nature to me, I find. And so it didn't, and it sounds naive, and I don't mean it to at all, because it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it didn't scare me to think, oh, let me go make a film, because it just seemed another creative process. It seemed a visual process. I had seen, I'm a film buff, I've seen a million films. I love them. I know what I like, I know what I don't like, I know that what works, and so I jumped into it, and I had a lot to learn, and I still would have a lot to learn. Julie Goldman is my producer, and Andrea Medic, creative consultant. They had done, Andrea had done Grizzly Man and Man on Wire, and Julie had worked on The Cove and Sergio, and a lot of, they had worked on Laundry List, and Alice Henty and Sophia. Alice Henty's line producer, Sophia Santana is associate producer. They had just finished The Tillman Story, which I think is a brilliant film. They've all worked on a lot of great films, and the fact that they would, that's what was sort of a miracle, is that I met with Andrea and Julie in Maryland at Silver Docks. A friend introduced us, my lawyer, and they embraced this film. They got it. I saw some footage I had already shot. They saw the charisma of Buck, and they said, you know, you have to direct this. You know what the story is. You know the horse part, and you know this is your story. So I just thought, I'm going to do it. It was not. It was such a hard thing to even describe. The process that you go through, it was so hard, but yet it was so rewarding. It felt so good the whole time.
Well, and technically, I assume that there's got to be some technical challenges for you, being that you don't have the technical background in filmmaking.
I don't.
Anything that...
So, with the cameras, that was where I was, you know, I had used still cameras, but the cameramen were they were also really gracious, because, you know, I didn't even know the terms for the slow-mo and the, you know, 60 and 20 and this and that, and so sometimes they'd say, I'm going to shoot in 60 now, and I'd be going, what's that? You know, so it really was kind of funny when you think about it.
When you initially first met Buck, what was your impression of him? Because I just, seeing all the layers that you reveal in the film, I was curious to know if you would instantly sense that about him. I'm guessing yes, after watching him talk today.
I did. You know, my friend Vern Smith knew him. He had known him since they were teenagers, and he kept saying, you should go see Buck, because he's this master horseman. You really should see him, because Buck, Vern had kind of turned me on to this type of horsemanship. So when I went, you're such in awe of how he rides, and you realize that he has something you want, you know, and you suddenly say, oh yeah, you know, I've been riding all my life, but no, that's the way it should be done. That's what I want. So that was the feeling. He's sort of intimidating. You know, he's not like any master class, anything, any kind of teacher, you know, whether it's ballet or, you know, any art. he's tough, and he does sometimes, make people cry, and he can be tough on you, but that's what most people go to him for. If you wanted to go someplace and just they could say what a great rider you are, what a great, whatever sport you're in you are, then you're going to the wrong person. You're there to learn, he's there to teach, and he's there, as he sometimes says, as a lawyer for the horse. He's trying to defend your horse, and it's usually you that's making all the mistakes, and so it can be an humbling experience. It's not always easy to hear, that it's your fault that your horse is acting up, because you want to blame it on, oh, he's a rescue, or oh, whatever. It's always his fault, and you can take that into your life, is that you want to blame everything around you that's going wrong on somebody else or those people, and sometimes you got to look in the mirror.
Were you aware of his background as a child? I mean, he talks about it a little bit, and so did you know, I guess, the details of it going into the filmmaking, or how did you kind of uncover that with him?
Because that book that he was talking about, The Faraway Horses, that's very much an autobiographical book, and so it's in there. It's quite detailed in his book, so I knew that was a big part of his childhood. I knew that was something he brought to the table that translated into, you're not going to train something with fear and intimidation, because he had things beaten into him, and I think that's a very tough thing to overcome. He was very open about talking about it, because he had talked about it in the book, and he realized how many people that had helped. He has people come up to him. I've seen it happen. People will walk up to him and they can't even get the words out. They just start crying, because they too have seen that dark part of life. And it's interesting, because I grew up in such a loving household and family, and so I can read about it, but I can't ever relate to that. I think my father raised his voice 2 or 3 times in my whole life that I can remember, so it's so night and day. And so I came to it in, I think, a real fresh way of, this is fascinating. But I didn't want to make a film about abuse.
Right.
I wanted to make a film about hope and inspiration, and that was very much what I set out to do. I mean, I love that thing about Mother Teresa, where she said, I would never march in an anti-war parade or movement, but I would march for peace, to make people more aware of horses and their sensitivity. I was taught riding, that you constantly have a bit really tight. I had muscles like this when I was a kid from holding. I had a thoroughbred off the track, and it was just all muscle and kind of wild, and I just held on to it all that. I never released it. And his whole philosophy is, as soon as you get them to soften, you soften. Like, you may have to be firm to get them, but as soon as they give a little bit, then you have to give it all back. And by doing that, they learn to trust you, like, okay, I'm not going to fight you the whole time. And when you think about that, how that, you could say that about a kid, like, you have to release, you have to reward those good tries. And that's what his philosophy is all about. And it was so earth-shattering to me, and I thought, I was so sad. Why didn't anyone ever teach me this before?
And you had over 300 hours of footage. How difficult was that editing process, and what parts did you wish you could have kept in that didn't make it?
Goodness, there were so many. Well, there was that to edit. I did work with Toby Shimon, and she's such a brilliant editor. So she was. Sometimes you really love things that you realize aren't pertinent to the story. So we had a lot of that. But there was something else that I just saw today, and I thought, oh yeah, because I've often told the story about when he said, when I asked him if he would work if he had the flu, and he says, of course, because there's no one else to take my job. And he said when he was a kid, and it would be 20 below, and the winds are whipping, and you had the sniffles or a cold, you had to go feed the cows. There was not anyone else to do it, and they were depending on you showing up. So he was kind of like, people go to the hospital for no reason. They muck up the system by running in for a hangnail. It's like if people would go and they're really sick, it would, solve a lot of our problems. Just, buck up a little bit. So that was one thing. There was something else, though, I just came across. It was just going to escape me. There was another thing that he also said, which I liked a lot, and I think it's very true. He said, a lot of people approach their barn and their horse with, like you're going to war, because it's been going badly. So you pick up the next day in a defensive mode. And so instead of just sort of cleaning the slate and starting fresh, especially with an animal, they live so much in the moment. If you're bringing this baggage from yesterday, when you're so mad at them, you're already at a loss, And so, but I realize we do that with people too. Like somebody's pissed you off a little bit and you just go back to them. Yeah, children, people, spouses, whoever, and you just go into it like it's battle before they ever open their mouth. And instead of just coming to it and being in that moment and saying, let's go from here.
When you've got the whole film completed and you've got the score layered on and you're heading to Sundance, are you really that unaware of how good the film is? I mean...
Yeah, well, of course, to get in Sundance, you think, well, that's really good.
Yeah.
Somebody likes it there. And I knew that the programmers really liked the film. I had ended up talking to them here and there. One of them came up to me in New York and just said, you could tell, he just said, I just love your film so much. And he was in an article, this is David Courier, and he said, I want all my crazy friends to go see this. I know nothing about horses, but I want all my crazy friends to go see this movie. And I thought, yes, he got, and he's definitely out of the horse world. I mean, he's very far removed from that. And we had tested it in New York on a lot of non-horsey audiences. Like just small little groups would bring in for the test screenings and would go back to the drawing room and cut and paste and, rework it. So by the time we got it to Sundance, we thought people were liking it, but we, hadn't shown it to that many people. So then we got in Sundance, which just thrilled me, and, but it's still never been shown to a big audience. So when we got that first standing ovation, it was about 460 people, I think, at the Library Theater. It was just amazing. But, but you're still like, okay, but is the next one going to fill up? But every single screening, they were turning away long lines of people. And the word on the street, you could feel that. Everyone says it's the buzz. And you heard people talking about it, and people would come up and talk to Buck. So, it's so surreal. It's everything you would hope for it.
Is this experience going to carry you on to another experience? It sounds like you have maybe another film lined up, or...
It does, someone has asked me, and then I brought the same team, and I think we're going to do it. I don't know. Honestly, we haven't really firmed anything up or gotten funding, and so it's a good possibility. There's something about it that almost scares me. Like, maybe I should just leave well enough alone.
Right.
It's like, this was a really good experience, and I think anything after this it's hard. It's going to be hard to top.